So welcome everyone to this Blended Live session. My name is Rowan Roberts. I'm from the London Connected Learning Centre, which runs blended.org.uk. And in today's session, we're going to be hearing from Focus-Trust, a multi-academy trust which includes 15 primary schools in the northwest of England. And we'll also be hearing from the Schools Partnership Programme, or SPP as you might hear us referring to it. More specifically, we'll be hearing about how Focus-Trust have worked with SPP, partly before the pandemic and also during the pandemic, and how their work might hopefully continue to impact on pupil outcomes in the future. So yeah, if you have questions during the session, please feel free to pop them into the chat. Given that we are fairly small in number, it may be more natural to just pipe up, and that's absolutely fine too. And if we have time, we'll either respond to them as they come in or towards the end of the session. So we are also going to be treated to a little practical demonstration towards the end from Guy, who's very kindly offered to show us something that they've been doing with technology in his school. So I thought that we would start off with a bit of a chance for people to introduce themselves. So if you'd like to just tell us who you are, where you work and what your interests are, and Anne, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thanks Rowan. Hello everyone, my name's Anne Cameron. I'm Programme Lead for the Schools Partnership Programme. It's Education Development Trust developed the Schools Partnership Programme about 7 years ago with colleagues like Helen and the other head teachers at Focus-Trust in response to that kind of move towards a more school-led system and approach to school improvement. So I'm really looking forward to hearing today how Helen and the team have used peer review specifically to look at blended learning. We're always really keen to see how people are using the programme, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Rowland, Chief Executive of Focus-Trust. We set up the trust in 2012 and we have 15 academies, and they're all in the Northwest and West Yorkshire. And we've been doing peer review for about 5 years now, and we're really pleased that this year, even during the pandemic, when it would have been very easy to say no, let's not do them, we managed to persuade our lovely head teachers to embrace new digital technologies and do them virtually. And we've been part of a national virtual peer review as well, so we've shown it is possible, and we've got some great findings to share with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. And we've got Donna here as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Donna Tandy. I'm Deputy CEO and Academy Improvement Partner for Focus-Trust, and I've had the privilege, I use that word carefully, to lead on the development of the Trust digital strategy over the past year or so. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. And Guy?
Hi everyone, I'm Guy Oliver. I'm a Year 6 teacher and digital strategy lead at one of the academies at Focus-Trust, Deeplish. I'm interested in all things technological really, augmented reality, virtual reality, all that kind of stuff, getting the children more engaged in their learning, specifically through that kind of technology. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. That sounds very exciting. So as you heard, we're fortunate to be welcoming 3 colleagues from the Focus-Trust in today's session. So Helen, just could you give us a little bit of background, a little bit of context about the trust? You mentioned that it's 15 schools in the Northwest, and maybe a little bit more about your approach as a trust as well.
Yeah, so we're very much, our priority is school improvement. And all the schools, when they join the trust, we taught them very comprehensive about our values and how important they are. So our values are care, dare, fair and share. So a really important part of our trust is that you share your expertise with other people, you share your worries. You share, any concerns with particular members of staff, and then other people will support you. And another thing that we do is dare. So we try and encourage people to take risks, knowing that they are supported. Peer review is integral now, it has been for the last 5 years, to our school improvement cycle. And initially people were quite worried about it, but actually it's now one of a highlight of the year. They learn a lot about their own school, but they learn a lot when they're leading reviews in others. We've got a very strong commitment to collective efficacy, which in Focus-Trust, our definition is a shared commitment to work together on the things that matter to improve outcomes for all. So by working on peer review, you are working together and, you know, supporting another school. But we've got lots of examples across our trust where a school's needed a deputy head and another school will let them have one. You know, when the school needs a head teacher for a period of time, and schools will help out. So that commitment is really strong, and peer review just fits in very well with it.
Excellent, thank you. So you mentioned a little bit about peer review. So we also have Anne here. Anne, could you explain a little bit about the principles behind the Schools Partnership Programme and peer review, and sort of a little bit more about how you work with different schools? Because obviously, as well as Focus-Trust, you work with a lot of other schools as well.
Yeah, so we work with any group of schools really that have got a commitment to working together and improving together. So that could be a trust like Focus-Trust, or it could be a local education partnership. It could be a diocese. We've worked with about 2,000 schools, I think, around the country so far. We use what our programme does really is mature the partnership working for that group of schools, helps them sort of co-create a way of working as a partnership, and matures the trust and the sort of lateral accountability that exists between the schools already. We do that by our team of associates will train at least a head teacher, a senior leader and a middle leader from each school in the skills of peer review and improvement, but also in that kind of developing a coaching culture, a collaborative culture, giving and receiving of feedback, non-judgmental inquiry, all those kinds of skills as well. We then they then have access to our inquiry framework, which is a really broad research-based kind of framework around school improvement, and then we train them in peer review methodology, which is we continue to develop over the years, speaking to colleagues like Helen and Donna and Guy and Liz, who I can see on the call now as well, about what works and what doesn't. We tweak. The idea always is that you shouldn't need us after a couple of years, and that's the case in Focus-Trust. So after a couple of years of working with the Schools Partnership Programme, the final sort of stages is really trying to help you transition to a self-sustaining model where a group of schools will take it in turns to be a host reviewer and then go and review other people's schools and really drive that cycle themselves. You use the word principles actually in the introduction, and that's really important to us, and I know it's important to Helen and colleagues at Focus-Trust too. We really believe that teacher agency, ownership, everybody's got something to give and something to learn from the process is really, really important. So that's really important to us as we develop our materials. And as Helen said, this year, we've developed a model of virtual peer review, which is opening up all sorts of possibilities, actually. People were quite reticent about trying it at first, and actually feedback has been, it's been a really positive experience to use technology in that way. And a couple of Helen's schools are actually helping us pilot a cross-regional peer review. So 2 schools from Manchester, 2 from Plymouth and 2 from Essex. They've all very much sort of embraced SPP as a sort of school improvement approach in partnerships, and they've now virtually opened up their social circle, I was going to say peer review circle, to get some fresh perspectives. That's been really exciting this year.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I guess describing it as a social circle, it's not wrong really, is it? Because it's all about kind of collaborating and working with colleagues and getting to know each other as well, I suppose. That's great. So I think a little bit later on we might hear in a bit more detail about some of the specific types of activity that happen in as part of peer review. But I just wanted to move back to Donna and ask you a little bit about what the last sort of year and a half has been like really in Focus-Trust, because obviously it's demanded a lot of fairly rapid change in a lot of ways. So if you can cast your mind back, if you dare, to sort of March of 2020, can you just talk to us a little bit about how you developed your initial strategy, your digital strategy to meet the needs of the pandemic situation?
Yeah, I think it's really important that actually our digital strategy, we developed it not because of the pandemic and not just to last for the pandemic, but actually to build something that would meet the needs of the trust as they were prior to COVID, but actually would have some longevity after COVID has hopefully been and gone. So we have actually started thinking about it before lockdown number 1 came, so that the seed had been sown in people's minds. And it actually kicked off on the 12th of March last year with Greenwood Academies Trust presenting at our Leaders Forum about what they've done with their digital strategy, which resulted really in all of our minds being slightly blown. But actually what it made us realise very quickly was the potential of the technology that we already had within the trust. So Microsoft 365 being the kind of main driver for that, and we already had that, but in all honesty, we weren't really using it beyond email. A couple of people had dabbled in Teams, but didn't really know what they were doing with it. So it just opened up our minds to the fact that we had this whole technological world out there at our fingertips, and we just didn't know it was there. So very quickly we realized, though, it's very easy in education. We go straight to the children, and we kind of think, well, we must teach the children, then the children will get it and everything will be okay. But actually, I think with this, we realized very quickly that we had to bring that back a step and look at staff competency and staff confidence with it. So actually, that was where we started. So lockdown number 1 did help, I think, with the pace of change and the necessity of us all having to get to grips with things. But actually, that would have still happened in that order, even if we hadn't have had a pandemic to deal with. So I went through the Microsoft Educator Centre and other sort of training platforms, and highlighted the kind of Focus-Trust core competencies, if you like. So what we needed all staff to be able to do to deliver the minimum offer that we were expecting from our schools, whether we're in a pandemic or not. And it was very ambitious. And Helen, when I sent Helen the first plan, she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, come on, let's run with it. And we got there. And we had staff accessing the Microsoft Educator Centre all over the place. And so that gave us that kind of grounding, if you like, and that keystone for everything else to kind of be built on top of. And then the other thing that we did as well with that, to make it a kind of trustworthy way of being, was we asked every school to identify a digital champion, hence why Guy is here. He was one of our digital champions. So every school has a digital champion, and we would meet regularly and we would share ideas, and they would signpost other people to things that they'd found. And then in their own schools as well, being that kind of trailblazer and that person who would try out new things in their classrooms, and then hopefully be able to say to staff, yeah, actually, that works really well, have a go at it, or actually, oh no, that was not great, so maybe we'll find an alternative. So and then from that, then we moved on to the children, and every school secured DFE funding, the virtual platform DFE funding. And so then the children, because the staff were able to use Teams by that point really effectively, it made that transition to the children using it much smoother, and actually then the staff were confident, and I think that then led to the pupil confidence as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really key, as you mentioned, the fact that a digital strategy is not just about a pandemic response, and that's definitely something that I think we've noticed with the schools that we work with, is regardless of where they were before they kind of put in place their digital strategy, for some schools a lot of things were already in place, and for some there was a bit less there. But I've seen a lot of schools making heavy use of the systems that they were using while they were teaching remotely, but making use of them even when children are in school, or when they've got bubbles going home, or just kind of finding ways of bringing that and keeping that continuity. And I think that's just great to see, because obviously we might not have been learning all of this stuff in the most ideal circumstances, but people have learned so much, and it's great that people are still continuing to hang on to that expertise and to use it in their practice. So thank you for sharing that. So Anne, obviously you told us a little bit about the kind of principles behind SPP. I was wondering if you could kind of maybe talk, and I'm sure that those from Focus-Trust might have things to say about this as well, but maybe talk a little bit about kind of the process itself. So maybe that might be some specific activities, or just get a bit of a sense of like what a session might look like if you're doing a peer review session with your other schools.
Okay, so usually you're going to have at least 3 to 4 schools in a peer review cluster. I know Helen's trust, they work in triads. So if you're willing to, or you're wanting to host a review in your school, we have a framework that you will self-assess against in collaboration with your SLT, and start to think about which area of focus you might want for a review. And the other 3 head teachers in your peer review cluster will have a pre-meet with you to kind of sense check some of that self-evaluation, and to really support and challenge you, I guess, to think, is that really what you want to know, or is that a safe option? Actually, what do you really want to get out of this review, and how can we find some new learning really to act upon? And then they will also plan a day, usually a day when it's face-to-face, of review activity. So that can be anything really. That could be talking to young people, parents, governors, walking around the school, looking at feedback, looking at books, a staff survey, a parent survey. Really, that's up to you, really, what you think is going to be the best sort of method of evidence collection to suit that review focus. They will then, as I say, if it's face-to-face, they'll go into the school for a day usually and do all those things. The virtual peer review model is actually, in some ways, quite good, because it means that you can tap into existing meetings, especially if they're online. And it's much less sort of disruptive and intense. Actually, we found that people doing virtual reviews have had time to reflect between activities and process information, so that's worked really well. At the end of that sort of burst of review activity, the head teachers will feed back to the head teacher, the host head teacher, and usually the improvement champion of that school as well. So they're a middle leader from the school, who we also train as part of the programme to facilitate improvement workshops and drive change, both in their school and in other schools in the partnership. And then there's an improvement workshop. So that's a really important part of the process, where that middle leader will, so if I'm hosting a review, my head teachers will have fed back to me on the areas of the review that came out most strongly, that we think we might want to workshop. And then a middle leader from one of those schools will come to my school, work with the relevant team in my school to work through some action planning, facilitate some ideas really for how you might tackle those most pressing issues that have come out as a result of the review. And then again, another really important part of this is 90 days later, the improvement champion will check back in, and the peer review team will check back in with the school to see what progress has or hasn't been made. Really, really important to say this is non-punitive, it's non-judgmental, it's about holding each other to account supportively, and sharing resource if need be to kind of to move things on. Now, what I would say is that's the SPP model of peer review. That's the way we train schools to run it. And I know Helen will be thinking, well, we do it slightly differently in Focus-Trust. And we really encourage people to take the model, tweak it, and do what they want with it to make it work for their context, which is definitely what you've done, isn't it, in Focus-Trust.
Yeah, and if there is anything that you'd like to say about how you do things differently in Focus-Trust, that would be great to hear about that.
Yeah, we're very true to most of the model, and the one aspect that we do vary on is we enable the improvement champions to come on the actual review day. So they're seeing, because it's just about gathering evidence. And the reason we like the SPP model is because it's about improving, not proving, and it's developmental, not judgmental. So all it is gathering evidence. You're not particularly forming an opinion, you're just gathering the evidence. And we all know as teachers, there is nothing more of a privilege than to go into another school and see other teachers that practice, other educators working, just look at the displays, talk to the children. So the improvement champions picked up so much information when they went on the reviews that we just thought, let's do this all the time. And it's helped them just at least create a little bit of a relationship with the people they're going to go and do the improvement workshop in, rather than walking in cold and meeting a whole staff room of people that you've never met before. At least they've made eye contact, interviewed a couple of people. So it's worked really well for us now for the last few years, and they've just said for their professional development, that's been amazing. So the very first year, lots of people worried about being the improvement champion, because you don't know what the focus of the review is going to be. So you might be like Guy, the year 6 teacher, and then the head might choose to do a review on outdoor learning in early years, and Guy might think, well, that's completely out of my comfort zone. But you don't go in as the expert. You go in, you're not the expert with all the answers. You go in as a facilitator, and you're trained to lead a coaching session. You're given lots of techniques and tools to use to facilitate a workshop like that. So it's an excellent model. And then people are anxious, but then at the end of the year, when they have to hand it on to somebody else, that they're a bit gutted, and then there's lots of people wanting to take on the role. So it's been really positive for people's professional development.
That sounds great. And also, so obviously we've heard a bit about sort of how it works sort of in Focus-Trust in terms of collaboration. And we've heard a little bit about how obviously collaboration, the nature of collaboration has changed a little bit because a lot of things have been happening online. I wonder if, Donna, if you could tell us about how kind of collaborating through peer review has been done differently since sort of March last year in your schools.
So I think the first thing is we've kind of actually put into practice all the bits we've been learning, because we've done it virtually. It's given us that opportunity as the kind of adults in it all to put into practice everything that we've been learning, everything that we've been expecting children and families to do with remote learning offers and so on. But actually, I think the key thing, I think, was the relationships and that kind of trust between the triads was established before this round of peer review. And I think that's really contributed to the success of it. I think it would be really hard to come straight into a virtual peer review if those relationships and that work hadn't have taken place previously. And we purposely chose to keep the triads the same this time so that they were the same. Each group of 3 had carried out a face-to-face peer review previously. So, that trust, that knowledge of each other's schools and so on was already there, because obviously you can learn quite a lot during a virtual peer review, but you also learn an awful lot about context by being in the actual building, which obviously couldn't happen this time. So that learning had happened prior to all of this, which is why I think that really contributed to the success of it as well. But in terms of the efficiency, so they were carried out virtually. Different people within the peer review teams were given different people to interview and ask the questions about. They did that, and actually that was really efficient because it meant that it would normally take a day, so we did it in half a day. And we could do things like, and I think this is something that we'll always do now on, before the report would be written, it would be written at the time, but then it would be emailed round everybody. People could add their comments in, resave it, re-email it round everybody else. Whereas now it was just done within Teams. It was done there and then collaboratively on the screen with everybody contributing. And so by the end of that session, that peer review report was written and agreed by everybody in the meeting. So, that just huge efficiencies in terms of working, and also efficiencies in terms of who you could speak to. So I think that more people were probably interviewed this time. And I think that as well was because of the focus that we chose, being the digital strategy. We wanted to know the impact of it on all different groups of staff and different people. But the virtual aspects made that much easier to manage because it was just a quick Teams call, have that conversation with somebody, and then you could go and feed back.
That's great. And I think sort of for us, putting this sort of blended program together and talking to lots of different staff members from lots of different schools, one of the things that has been really great for us, and that I hope has been useful for teachers, I've been told it has been useful for teachers, is having the opportunity to kind of learn from the lessons that other people have gone through, because everyone's context is so different. Everyone will have had different challenges and found different solutions for them, and some of those solutions may have been unsuccessful and some of them may have been successful. So I think it would be really, really great if you'd be sort of generous enough to share what your kind of key lessons are, and maybe what are some things that you might have done a bit differently with the benefit of hindsight at the kind of when you were kind of creating your initial digital strategy.
Yeah, so after all the peer reviews took place, I think, gosh, it was only last week, I had a meeting with all of the improvement champions and all of the digital champions together. What I had done prior to that meeting was I'd actually gone through all of the peer review reports that they'd written and kind of pulled out the common themes and common headlines on, because we had the 3 questions. So they're all, to what extent does it improve? So we wanted to look at the curriculum. We wanted to look at teaching and learning, and we wanted to look at wider efficiencies across schools. So every peer review focused on those 3 aspects of it. So I pulled all of those out and we talked about them as a group, and we shared about them. And I think the key things that came out were consistency across schools was something that was really, really key. So where schools had been very clear in their expectations, very clear in what they expected teachers to do, other staff to do, what they expected parents and children to do, because it wasn't just about remote learning either. We were really keen that we didn't kind of end up down that rabbit hole of remote learning, but it was the wider strategy. So where those expectations and that consistency had been there from the start, they were seen to be more successful in the kind of implementation of the strategy. And also where time had been really given, particularly in the summer term last year and the autumn term of this school year, time had been given to staff development, so staff meeting time, really clear investment in skills and confidence and knowledge had massively impacted. And those schools who hadn't perhaps given that time, because again, they've got 101 different other plates to spin, and it's like which one takes priority, but those who hadn't had felt that they were a little bit further behind those. So I think, you know, that really deciding those expectations and really making sure that time and that investment is given to professional development is something, you know, that I think as a trust, I think we're really pleased generally with how it went. And I think, you know, the way that we did it, but obviously you've got 15 variables of 15 different schools in there, each with their own priorities and context. So things are never going to happen in exactly the same way. But they were kind of the two big ones for me that came out where more success had been seen. They were the main factors that had contributed to that. And I think, you know, that's sort of a lesson that we all learned. And also just streamlining those systems. So those schools that went straight to Teams, fully embraced Teams, and really looked at those apps within Teams, again, that seemed to have more success because there was less to learn, there was less dabbling around. It was just, this is what we're using, and you know, let's really do. It's about doing less really well rather than trying to do more not as well. And so that really came out as well. And the workshops that the improvement champions led, an awful lot of them were focusing now on the what next. Where do we go next? What are we going to keep from all of this? You know, which bits have we done because we've had to because of COVID? Which bits have really made a difference, particularly to the workload efficiencies one, and that kind of teaching and learning. How do we keep the profile of teams in the classrooms now that we don't have a remote learning offer for everybody? Obviously, we still have people isolating and bubbles closing and so on. So yeah, some kind of real key things there. And then the biggest thing that we need to focus on next is kind of the more techie bits, if you like. We've really kind of gone down the people aspects, and the teaching and learning aspects is now the infrastructure in all of the schools. Do we have the kit, the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi connection, the broadband connection to actually deliver this now in a sustained way moving forwards, which obviously becomes more tricky because people are very you know, they like their technological support, they like the people they work with, they like the way they're doing things, and it might mean for some that we have to take a few more leaps of faith in terms of changing that infrastructure and changing the way we work. And of course, the biggest thing that comes along with looking at the infrastructure is, of course, money. So, you know, there's lots of conversations to be had moving forwards with those.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, really good food for thought there. Just to mention, by the way, that you probably know this if you found this session, but the Blended website, which is blended.org.uk, has some other courses and learning materials. So those of you who are thinking about sort of CPD for teachers, if you're kind of looking for places to go, everything on that website is free, and you're very, very welcome to use it. So please do make use of that website. Great. Okay, so I think we've had kind of alluded to this a little bit throughout a few of your answers, but just to really kind of pin this down, are there aspects of kind of the way that you've been using technology out of necessity that you intend to use in the future when it might not be a necessity, but it is helpful? And I'm thinking partly in terms of the peer review process, so that's maybe a question for Anne, but also in terms of your work as a trust at Focus-Trust. So I don't know who wants to sort of take that one first, maybe Donna or Guy to talk about.
Yeah, I'll go first, Guy, then you can pick up on anything I forget. I think for us it's about the blended approach is really important now. So we've been talking about this a little bit at the meeting Helen and I've been at today, is around, you know, attendance at meetings. We've certainly found attendance, certainly at governors' meetings and governor forum and events, has been better because they're not having to travel. And also how then, you know, can we facilitate people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to come to a meeting because their own working lives, you know, and you were just saying, you know, you're in one meeting that you're probably speaking to people in London, and then suddenly you're speaking to us up north without having to move more than about 2 meters. So I think it's things like that are really important, and I think, you know, we can do more with our time, we can be more efficient with our time, definitely, but I think we need to not lose, you know, the importance of the face-to-face and those relationships and seeing things in context, and I think it's just about the communication. Communication's a really key one, how we communicate with all our heads and with other staff. I think one of the big things for me around professional development and communication with staff has been support staff and teaching assistants in particular. Always been a group, you know, when I'm planning school improvement and CPD opportunities, how do we get to our teaching assistants? Because it's not logistically possible to bring them all together. And actually the answer was there all along, I just didn't know it. And we've delivered some really high quality support staff professional development this year that they've really valued and been a part of. So that definitely will carry on. I'll let Guy talk now. Go on, Guy.
Yeah, pretty much like you said, really. Using Teams as our main method of communication across the school and indeed across the trust. Using it as our main file storing hub too, so teachers can plan on documents in real time together without having to be in the same room. That's become more efficient. We still want to use Teams for homework, particularly the use of OneNote, like Class Notebook. That's going really well for us at the moment. Just the fact that children can write on their homework with their finger, it's meant that 100% of children are wanting to do their homework and are asking for it all the time as well. So that's really good. And just using all the software and the apps that are out there and available to us. I mean, most of them become free to educators now over the last year, and using those to enhance children's learning and capitalizing on the teachers' renewed confidence in technology to push the boundaries of how we teach, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Anne, did you want to say anything about the peer review process and how if at all that has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely agree with everything Donna and Guy just said about sort of resource efficiency and time efficiency and being much more focused with your time when you're using the virtual model. We know that most people, we think, will start to move to a blended version of the peer review model and use some of the virtual elements and some face-to-face still. We've certainly done that with our delivery model as well. So there are elements now of our programme, the training inputs from us as a team, which we will do online. I think I would echo, though, that and I remember a head teacher said this to me back in June when they were piloting the virtual peer review with us, it's the relationships that enable the technology. So having, as Donna said earlier, having that sort of trust already as a group really helped you to be able to transfer to online. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it makes it much easier to be able to do that. And the other thing I'd say as well is we've just launched a map-to-map peer review programme for MAP senior leaders to peer review each other. And actually, the feedback from a focus group we held with MAP CEOs was like, oh, we'd much rather do these things online than travel up and down the country. With time poor. And I think the technology has got so much better and we trust it now. So I think there's a definite shift in the sector.
Of years ago, Rowan, we took part in a peer review with another trust, and we were travelling to Lincoln. Some of us were in London. We travelled to Reading, and it took 3 days of our time and several hours on trains and cars and 2 nights in a hotel. And having talked to that CEO in the trust, we said, we'll do another one next year, but we'll do it virtually. And we will be able to get the same outcomes. We'll be able to talk to people. Donna didn't actually say this, but we used flip grids, didn't we? We gathered pupil views, and the people in the school could create a flip grid. So, with COVID, we weren't able to talk to lots of children, but we had views from families and children on flip grids, and that was really helpful and just so efficient. So yeah, we just got to remember how to do all these things.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. So unless we have any questions from our chat, I think we're going to move to a little session from Guy now, who's going to demonstrate a bit of an example of kind of some of the things that we've been talking about, I suppose. So Guy, I'll hand over to you.
No problem. Let me just share my screen with everyone. There we go. Right, so this then is the impact of interactive technologies on my school, and I'm going to have a sort of specific focus as well on Jamboard throughout. So I'm doing this little bit of presentation at the moment on Jamboard. You wouldn't really use it for presentation as such. You'd probably still use your PowerPoint and things like that. But Jamboard is just a great sort of interactive tool. It's almost like an interactive whiteboard that multiple people can use at any one time. It's great for using with the children, great for using with the staff as well. We've had amazing staff responses whenever we've been doing staff meetings, and I've done a lot of the peer review stuff using Jamboard as well, which I'll get onto in a moment. So Jamboard in a nutshell then, it's a virtual interactive whiteboard. Up to 50 people can get on it at once. It's simple, it's child friendly. There's only really 8 buttons that the children have got to learn when you use them with them down here, and they all sort of tell you what they are when you hover your mouse over the top. You can use it in a couple of different ways, really. You can have one Jamboard open on the front of your classroom on the big interactive whiteboard there. You can have a few laptops or devices given to groups of children, or you can give one device to each child and they can all input their ideas onto the same thing at once, really. And as I've said, yeah, it's not just for children, it's great for collaborative staff meetings as well. So I just want to sort of show you what the impact of this was on my school. So to sort of show you that, really, I've got to go right back to the beginning of the first lockdown. So in March to July here, our very first lockdown, we were using, we weren't using Teams at that time. We were using a different sort of virtual learning environment then. We had 59% of the children getting on with it after a month. And then at the end, just before we broke up for the summer holidays, we had 44% of children engaging with that. So we knew really, because of that 15% drop, we knew really that we had to do something about that. So we set out with our vision, really, with the help of the rest of the digital strategy group, including Donna. We decided that we all wanted to move to Teams. We wanted to do live lessons if we ever went off again. We knew something was brewing around then. So live lessons, at least 3 of those a day we wanted to do. We wanted to record those sessions so that children could stream them. That was particularly vital for us, really, because there were lots of families in our environment that only had one laptop between the whole family. So it was important that if the children missed any live lessons, they could access them at a later date. But the main thing, really, the main bit of our vision that we wanted to do was we wanted our lessons, our online lessons, to be much more engaging. And that's why we started to want to use Jamboard really more. So here are some very quick examples of Jamboards that we use, that we still use now in school. So here's a really good one. We've got what kind of pet do you have? And we have all the pets along the bottom, and the children grab a sticky note there and write their name on and put what pet they had. And this could be used in multiple different ways. We've used that in a staff meeting as well. How much of your project is complete? Because each one of our staff members at our school has a sort of mini project going along the side. And we've got like 10 to 20% down the bottom here, leading all the way up to 70, 80, 100, how people are getting on with that. This one's great. It's a brain dump. So it's all about getting children's prior knowledge. So what do you remember about the Greek god Zeus? And children can either, again, you can have this on the board at the front and have children come up and pop their sticky notes on it, or you can have those devices given out to children so they can pop that on it as soon as you ask the question, basically. We've got label the major cell, name the major parts of the cells in a plant as well. So that's an annotation station example. Here's a really good one of that we used recently, an annotation station. How Greeks have contributed to society. So we've got things like military advancement. We've got the parliament building in the background. So they've got government systems, architecture, that kind of thing. A sorting wall activity. This was great. They used this in year 4 when they were doing Romeo and Juliet. They have to put the main characters of Romeo and Juliet into the different houses, Montagues and Capulets. So this is one of the finished products of those. You know, the closer they are to the line, the more of a relationship they've got, and the further away from the line, you've got the Lord and Lady Capulets and Montagues up there. And the prince down the bottom here is straddling the line because obviously he's not part of any family. This was one thing that I took, that I used to print these out and stick them in the children's books. And what I found was when I started doing them online and doing them with Jamboard is that children were much more engaged. Their responses were so much better just because they were doing it on a laptop in the classroom. And then we just printed them off and stuck them in books instead. It was much better. We've got a how's it going one. This is one that I use still now. I used it just the other day. Put it up on your interactive whiteboard at the very front. And what the children would do then is they would get a sticky note. They'd write their name on it there, and they'd either put their sticky note in the thumbs up for they're doing well in a task, or they're okay, they don't need that much help, they're relying on their peers and the displays around them in here, or if they really do need help, then it's on there. And all I'm doing then when I'm going around the children and I'm helping children out is I'm looking at that section there and thinking, those are the children that I need to go to next, then those ones there. We've got a 4 corners activity. Similarly, the children will just get a sticky note and they'll put their name in one of the corners. I use this as sort of a maths starter for the day. As soon as the children are coming in, just before registration, as soon as they arrive, they'll pop their name on a sticky note and they'll put it there, and it prompts really good discussion really during the day. This was my year 6's favourite Jamboard while we were off. We've not used it since we've come back for obvious reasons that you'll see in a moment. But what they'll do is all their names would be populated all around the edges here. And they could choose then, if we were doing an activity that required breakout rooms, they could choose if they want to. They could go in the quiet room, which is no one's talking, no one's typing any messages. They could go in this red room here, which is just messages in the chat box, but microphones and cameras are off. This one, microphones and cameras are on, so they can collaborate with each other, they can talk to each other, they can discuss, or they could come into the room that I'm going to be in, so they can get extra help from me, basically. Then that's a good one. If ever we do need to go off again, touch wood, though we won't. But there's loads of different examples of all the different things. I don't want to go through everything because I'll send this out if you want, and everybody's got a copy of all this, then they can use that. I'll skip to some of the teacher bits that we did because we've used it in a lot of staff meetings recently. So this was just after lockdown. We did a stop, start, continue. And we asked the teachers, what do you want to stop doing now that we're all back, and now that we're all back in school? What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to start doing? Are there any new technologies that we want to use, within the classroom that we've not yet? And what do you want to continue doing? So what do you want to take from the lockdown period and start using now we're back in school? And we're getting lots of really good responses from staff there. Another one, this was after we did our peer review. So we had 4 improvement points from our peer review at Deeplish, and this was how we got everyone's ideas really about what they wanted to do on each sort of development point really. And what we did from this then is we, as an SLT, we basically took these 4 Jamboards and we said, all right, well, that's the best idea there for number 1. That's what we'll do to tackle number 1. We like these 2 solutions for number 2, so that's what we'll do there. It's just a really good way of getting staff, because usually in staff meetings, what it would have been that big sort of flip chart paper. Everyone would be, with the marker pens all sprawled out across the table, and then you'd have to gather them all back in and type it up onto a document. But it's already done for us here. It's already there. And it's also a really good way as well of getting down everybody's ideas as well, not just the staff members who perhaps, been there the longest, got the most experience, or have got the loudest voices perhaps, and you lose the quieter ones at the back. It gets everybody's opinions then are equal, because all the post-it notes are equal really. And we've done this as well, where we are in staff meetings on a particular sort of strategy. Sometimes we go into the learning pit. Everybody's seen this type of stuff really before. We also have a Twitter thoughts one. This is when we're doing virtual staff meetings. We have this up at the start, so as soon as staff members come in, they can read the tweet. We have different educators' tweets up there, and then they can put their responses on there. So we've had here, want to get great at something, get a coach. This is something that I tweeted out a few weeks ago, and then the staff members put in their responses to that as well. So the impact of all that really then, so in the sort of January to February lockdown there, in the first full week, we got 70% of the children online. And by the final week, we were getting 87% of the children engaged with their learning. So it's almost double from that July number that we were getting in the first lockdown. So yeah, really, really positive for us. Our peer review as well, then in March went really positive, using all the Jamboards for that. Yeah, and then I did the improvement workshop as well for all the other different schools around In Focus. So children are more engaged because we're using Teams and Stream. Children are more engaged in the lessons because we're being more technologically advanced. We're being more digitally collaborative. We're being a bit braver, I think, with the technology in the classroom because it's forced us to be brave, really, the pandemic has. We're using Jamboard, Helen mentioned before, we're using Flipgrid, we're using something called Plickers as well, which is one of my favourites at the moment. We absolutely love it. The children are more engaged with homework, like I mentioned before, because we're using OneNote. Staff are being more collaborative with each other, both inside school and in the peer review process. Collaboration, I feel, is stronger than it was under normal circumstances because of all the technology that we've got now to facilitate that. It's forced us to be innovative. All the staff and the children are being empowered through the technology. We recently sent a staff survey out and they're saying 95% of staff are saying that the way they teach has significantly improved thanks to the digital strategy that we've implemented. And yeah, that's everything of mine. If you do want to make a copy of this, when I send it out, all you've got to do when you see it on the screen is click the 3 dots here and you hit that make a copy there and it saves it to your own Google Slides then, and you can have all those different strategies there for you to use with your staff in the classrooms. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, and thank you for being generous enough to share your templates there. I'm sure that a lot of people will find them really useful. I know I certainly will. I really love it when I love seeing when somebody has sort of taken something and really explored it to taken a versatile tool and really explored the different applications of it, because I think sometimes, especially with technology, it can be tempting to find sort of a different solution to every problem. And I think what's so lovely about the way that you've used Jamboard here is that, you know, you've got one tool, but actually you've been able to use it in so many different ways. And as you say, like it does have really interesting applications for kind of getting ideas out of a group of people, basically, because normally when we do that in person, actually in some ways that our existence as social beings can inhibit us slightly. We always get some people that are a bit more willing to share than others. It can be a little bit difficult to hear from everyone, whereas when you're using something like Jamboard, you can hear from everyone in the time it takes for one person to write one post-it, and there's something that's just really powerful about that. As we've said, like obviously there are limitations to what we can do online, but it's great that we've been able to find such kind of valuable applications for things that we can continue to use in the future. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we're kind of drawing sort of towards the end of the session, but I wanted to just give those of you who've joined us a little opportunity to ask any questions that you might want to ask, maybe of Guy about Jamboard, or maybe of any of our other guests who've spoken today.
Rowan, could I ask you a question?
Certainly can.
When we, back in the first lockdown, where we were all kind of working out how to function in this digital age, you were really, really helpful to us in embracing Jamboard and gave us some really good sort of basic tips to get started. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wonder if you could share some of those. I can remember some of them, but it's probably better from coming from you.
Oh yeah, wow, that's a tricky one.
I've put you right on the spot. Sorry.
Yeah, I remember writing that little list, but I haven't got it in my head right now. I think one of the things so this is something which I think was also mentioned by somebody that created a video resource for us, again on the BlendEd website, and it was the kind of 3, 2, 1, go approach, which I really liked. Now it was specifically an approach that was talking about live online lessons. So if you're trying to get, and it's exactly the same problem that Guy is talking about solving with Jamboard, but you're trying to get all of the children's response to something. It might be that you're doing a quick sort of a little quick assessment at the beginning of a session to get a sense of what level of confidence the children are, or whether they know a certain piece of information. And if you ask them in person, you'd hear from one child, and that wouldn't necessarily give you a good idea of everyone. And also, if you ask them all with their mics on and they speak out loud, then you're still not going to hear from everyone. So doing a thing where you do a kind of like 3, 2, 1, go, so no one is allowed to say anything. Everybody types their message, but they're not allowed to hit send until you do your little 3, 2, 1. Can be a really nice way of making sure that everybody actually does post a comment, and that people are not just saying what someone else has said because they've already typed it. It's just that they're hitting send. That would maybe be one tip. Another thing that I would mention is I don't want to kind of detract from Jamboard because it is such a great tool. I feel like I have gone on a similar journey to what Guy has with Jamboard, but with the tool Padlet, which I am just a massive fan of. I love Padlet. I think it's so great. It does so many different things, and I've used it in lots of different ways. Partly for creating home learning resources, but also I've started using it more in in-person stuff as well. Very similar to Jamboard, really, in that it's a kind of online notice board where you can post different things. I suppose Jamboard's more like the big flip chart paper with the post-its, whereas Padlet, you can post a lot more different types of content on there. And I found that that's made it useful as a format for presenting resources to kids, because you can record your voice and have a little explanation, like audio clip. You can record a little video. It might be a screen sharing video, or it might be a video of you speaking. You can add links to different websites, and it presents them all in a really nice way. And then also, a bit like those many different Jamboard formats that we saw, Padlet actually kind of comes with its own sets of formats that help you organize things in a way that's like visually appealing. And I found that different ones are useful in different situations. So that's my other thing that I'd say is like the big thing that I do differently right now compared to a year and a half ago is using Padlet a lot. Yeah, I'm not sure whether that was what I put in that list that I sent you, Anne, but hopefully that is helpful nevertheless. Okay, before we wrap up, are there any further questions that anybody would like to ask to any of our speakers, or do any of our speakers have anything else that they would like to say? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for your time and for your insights. It's been really, really interesting and really inspiring to hear from you all. I know that you're all extremely busy, so I do really appreciate it. And thanks so much to those of you who've joined us as well. As I said, we've recorded this session, so we will put the recorded version of the session on the website in case you think any of your colleagues might find it interesting or helpful. I think if Guy's okay with this, we might also put the link to those lovely Jamboard templates on there as well, so that you can use those materials in the future. But with that, I'll say thank you very much for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.